And so you have to be mindful of what you watch. If you start to listen to something and you start to feel a little bit like, not in a way like, all right, I may listen to certain people and they're teaching about God. And sometimes, they're just like, listen, you got to let that go. You have to forgive. Now, that may feel uncomfortable, but we do need to do it. Okay. That's not what I mean. I mean, somebody who's like going off on women, who's, talking about caregivers, making you feel bad. If you're not up to it, don't listen to it, right? Don't. You know that you have sleepless nights. You know that sometimes you're checking on your loved one throughout the night, constantly making sure that they're, okay, that they're breathing. I'm just saying what we do, right? You're making sure that they're okay, that they're breathing, that they're this, that they're that. You know that you're doing that. And so why allow any type of garbage to come into your space? And that's how I want to put it. Don't. Right? Garbage stinks. We don't want garbage in our own home. So why would we even allow someone to give us garbage, to allow garbage to come into our minds, our thoughts, and even our emotions? No, get rid of it. Don't listen to it. Scroll on past it. You've got enough things to do. So, for us, like I said, our lives changed. And so I became a researcher. And I love to research. I get a kick out of researching. And I started to research different things that I wasn't even sure of. Some of the things I was looking at, like I started looking at lights, because we understand with epilepsy, it's a flicker rate. Right, the flicker rate that causes seizures in some people. There's photosensitivity, and so I was like, "Hey, how does lighting, affect?" And I started reading up on lights and how the CFLs have the high flicker rate in them, and so I ended up changing our light bulbs. I went on Epilepsy Foundation. That was one place I Googled it. There's so much information out here. If you start to even look at your loved one as a caregiver, and you notice now for us. We were in New York City, okay? And the ministry that we went to was down in the Times Square area. And so I started to notice when we would get ready to go to the ministry, and at the time, I was serving even as an assistant pastor at the time. I know some of y'all are like, women can't be pastors. I have the call of a pastoral caregiver. And what does that mean in essence? I care deeply about the people of God, whether saved or unsaved. I care deeply about the people of God, because I wasn't saved before either. I didn't even want parts of it. But thank God he didn't strike me with lightning, and he loves me so much. So, and he loves you too. So, but we were down there, and I would notice that when we would get ready to go, sometimes my daughter was like, "Mommy, no, I don't want to go." Or we would be walking and, something would happen with like her. Something changed with her demeanor. Like she would just get very upset. I didn't get it, right? And so as a parent, sometimes you're like, well, we got to get there. Come on, hurry up. Let's go. You're like trying to get places because you know that you have things that you need to do. And sometimes we need to give a little bit more grace in that space. And maybe you are a pastor. Maybe you are a missionary, a leader in your church. And I have to say this. All right, y'all might not agree with me. Some of the things that people did back in the day, with children, it's not always the best thing. I think sometimes we need to allow God to show us how to raise our children. I know, like sometimes, and I know, like, yank your child to church, get them there, yank them to wherever you're going. Sometimes I feel like, especially when you are a caregiver of a child who is special needs and has, exceptionalities. And I want to say this, what's my quote? All children are special and all children have needs. Some of those needs are different than others. I will always say that because all children are special and all children need their parents. They need you to feed them. They need you to wash their tushy, and all that stuff. So I noticed And I'm just saying, can we be a little bit easier? And I'm going to give you my story. Like, I like to share certain things with you to help you understand why I'm saying this. And so my responsibility, I was like, I'm this assistant pastor. I need to get there for the people. I need to hurry up. I got to get there. And it was she and I. And so I didn't really have, at the time, someone that, I could say, bring her for me, right? And so even if there were some people who were offering, I noticed how those people looked at my child certain times and how they spoke to her are different. And so even though they were offering, they were not the ones to help, because I had to speak to them. And so it was like, nah, I'm not doing that. That might make it easier on me, but that's not going to make it easier for her. So we have to think about that too. And I know some people will say, well, push them. And I get it. We do have to push our children, but we need to nudge them lightly sometimes, I feel, as opposed to a hard push. And I know sometimes, right, if you're a parent of a child who has special needs and you see, other children or other people who sometimes are thriving at a different level. Your children are thriving. They're just thriving at their own level and their own pace. And I believe that's all we all need to do, even as adults, thrive at our own level and our own pace, right? And not put unrealistic expectations on our children and push them because Susie Q's children are doing it. So you better be like Susie Q's children. You better, da 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 da. You know how it happens sometimes. We don't need to do that. Let them thrive the way they need to. Find out how they creatively learn. Get the Barbie dolls out if you play with, they play with those. Teach with the dolls sometimes. This is Mr. So-and-so. And this is how he says the Spanish alphabet. A, B, C. Play a little bit with it so that you can get them intrigued and listening. Whatever works, it's okay because they're children, for goodness sake. This is my take. If you don't agree with it, then it's okay. I don't mind if you don't. But that's why I put up this podcast, so I could talk from my perspective, okay? And so I believe that we need to be able to teach and do it according to our family and make good friendships with other families who sometimes have children who are nice for your children to play with. If you notice that your child is being bullied, sometimes you got to change that. You got to, listen, and I get it. Sometimes we're like, well, we have to teach our children how to deal with everyone in this world. Yeah, but if it's causing them so much grief and anxiety, I don't think it's the best thing to do. Super serious. I just don't. They'll adapt. Let them do it in their time. They don't have to play with everyone, especially if someone doesn't want to play with them in the first place. And then you have some children who might bully, and they may make great friends and different things like that. They're just experiencing their own thing. But that's for you as the caregiver to find out. It's not for someone to always try to tell you. It's for you to do. So I had to make a decision because it was becoming super stressful. And when it does, my thing is I need to pray and ask God. Sometimes we pray even as parents, but we need to just listen. Like sometimes we're like, Lord, make that child get ready and do what I need them to do because I need to do what I need to do. That's what the prayer is sometimes. And sometimes we get to change that and say, Lord, what is it that you're trying to show me in this? What is it that you want me to get out of this? And what I got out of it may not be what you get out of it. But what I got, I'm going to share with you because I think it's important. It was just love her, right? And stop pushing so hard to get there. Now, I know somebody just said, what? But it was true for us. Love her, right? And don't worry about pushing so hard to get there. When that happened, I didn't know that I was going to be transitioning from that ministry, even out of that state. I had no idea. But God knows all things. And so I'm glad that I listened. I'm glad that, sometimes as believers, we have to fast. We have to turn our plate down when things are going interestingly. And we have to submit ourselves. Or parenting, I know there are parenting books, but what I'm saying is when you come out and you have your child and they're just born, nobody goes, here's this book. Start reading. Get up, you just had the child. Start going on to chapter whatever. That's not what happens. You have the child and you're like, okay, what do I do now? And sometimes you're so tired, you're not thinking about reading a book anyway. But if you do want to read a book, let me put this plug in here. There's a book called Touch Points by Dr. T. Brazelton, and it goes through the different stages of children, I guess from 0 on up. I can't remember where he stops. I feel like it's somewhere after the toddler range, but it's a good book to have for some knowledge. And you're not going to get everything out of the book. Experience is going to be your greatest teacher. Now, let me say this. 2 people who have studied various fields, early childhood, special needs, epilepsy. If you are that wonderful doctor, we had the best epileptologist. Oh my gosh. I'm going to put a plug in here for her, and you can tell her I sent you if you live in New York. Her name is Dr. Julianne Palicki. And she is with, I feel it's the Northeast Regional Center. I hope she doesn't get me if 100 people call her. But anyway, my goodness, this lady listened. And that's what I want to say. Even if you have studied, and this is in any area, if you've studied early childhood, if you've studied these medical conditions or whatever, special needs, children with exceptionalities, our wonderful, beautiful, creative babies, if you've studied that, but yet you don't have a child who has experienced it, it's important for you. I know you're busy. You're a teacher. You're in the educational system. You know about special needs, but special needs is not a cookie cutter situation. Every child that is deemed as a special needs child, they get lumped into this category. And I used to be upset about it. I was like, my child is not special needs. I remember, I feel like my boss at the time might have been mentioning it. And I was like, no, she's not. She's not. She has a health condition, right? Other health impaired is another, category for special needs. And so sometimes, regretfully, people will say, well, I studied for years. I've worked in this field. I know that those children are these children. And my thing is, it's not helpful when you do that. It's really not. I'm just saying it's not helpful. It's not helpful. I have a very dear friend, we're friends, and we were having a discussion, and I couldn't believe it, but I started breaking out in hives during the conversation, because my friend, she's been in that field, and she's learned and she's studied and she has her degrees in it. But once again, having a degree in it and living it, 2 totally different things. And I always say, don't make, what is it that I love to say? Oh my gosh, I have to write this down. Anyway, I'm going to say it like this, but don't make like a whole sermon or a whole message or a whole ideology out of an encounter. Even if it's multiple encounters, even if you're in the educational system and you see that child for 8 hours of the day, excuse me, you have to realize, or more, that when that child gets home, first of all, that parent is the one who had that child. They bore that child for 9 months, or if that child is adopted or foster care, whatever it is, that's the parent. And as he says in the book, Touch Points, the parent is the expert regarding their child, because some of the things that our little ones will not show you while they're sitting in that classroom with their arms so nicely folded and so quiet and so sweet, they will show us another side, because we are their caregiver and it's a safe space for them to act out. Seriously. So they'll act out with us, or, get mad, or if the bully is bothering them, they will come home. They might not show it at school because they don't want to feel like a tattletale. That's another thing I'll talk about, bullying, but not today. But they won't do that, but they'll come home to the caregiver, and we see a different side. We see a different side sometimes even with the medication. The medication that they get causes something in the chemistry, and they will act out. You have some caregivers who regretfully have been punched in the face, and all they know to do is that they are in shock almost, because this is their beautiful child, and they know that the child wasn't like this before, and so all they can do is